The transport ship broke through the clouds of Prime, and Commander Blake pressed his face closer to the viewport. Below them stretched a city unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive structures of dark metal rose from the ground like the fangs of some great beast. Sharp angles and aggressive architecture dominated the landscape. This was not a place built for comfort. This was a place built for predators. Pulled back from the window and checked his uniform one more time. Everything had to be perfect. They did not tolerate weakness, and they certainly did not respect carelessness. He had read every report, studied every cultural file, and watched every video the diplomatic corps had on these aliens. None of it made him feel better about this mission. Lieutenant sat across from him, checking his sidearm for the third time. The security officer looked calm, but knew better. Always checked his weapon when he was nervous. It was a tell that had noticed years ago when they served together in the fleet. "Put it away," said quietly. "They will see it as a challenge." Nodded and holstered the weapon. "Right. Show no fear, show no aggression, show no weakness. I remember the briefing, sir." Dr. Kate sat beside, her tablet balanced on her knee. She had been reading the same document for the past hour, her eyes moving over the text again and again. Recognized the behavior. She was terrified and trying to hide it by staying busy. "Kate," said, "you have studied the longer than anyone else in the diplomatic service. You know more about their culture than they probably know themselves. Trust your knowledge." Kate looked up at him and could see the worry in her eyes. "Knowing about them and standing in a room with them are two very different things, Commander. They have killed 3 diplomatic teams in the past decade, not because they were hostile, just because those teams showed weakness at the wrong moment." Had read those reports too. He had seen the pictures. They did not kill like humans killed. When they decided something was prey, they acted on instinct that went back millions of years on there, and they made Earth look like a peaceful garden. The ship touched down on the landing platform with barely a shudder. Through the viewport could see the welcoming committee. A dozen warriors stood in formation, each one nearly 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in thick fur that ranged from to black. Their faces were long and wolf-like, with powerful jaws and sharp teeth. Their eyes glowed a faint amber color in the afternoon light. At the center of the formation stood the largest had ever seen. This had to be the leader of the High Council war armor that looked like it had been through 100 battles. Scars covered his exposed arms and face. His eyes fixed on the transport ship with an intensity that made skin crawl. "Remember," Kate said as they prepared to exit, "do not look away first. Do not show your teeth. Do not make any sudden movements. And for the love of everything, do not touch any of them unless they initiate contact." Nodded. "Anything else that might keep us alive?" Kate managed a weak smile. "Pray they had a good breakfast." The ramp lowered and hot air rushed into the ship. Prime was a warm world, much warmer than Earth. Felt sweat begin to form under his uniform, but he ignored it. He straightened his back, lifted his chin, and walked down the ramp with and Kate following behind him. Watched them approach. His amber eyes tracked every movement, forced himself to maintain eye contact. The leader was evaluating him, measuring him, deciding if he was worth the time or just another weak species to be dismissed. Stopped 3 meters away and bowed his head slightly. Not a deep bow, which would show submission, but a shallow one that showed respect. Kate had drilled this into him for weeks. Studied him for a long moment. Then the massive alien stepped forward, fought every instinct that told him to step back, leaned down, bringing his face close to us. The leader's breath was hot and smelled of meat. "You are small," said in heavily accented standard. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel being dragged across metal. "Yes," replied simply. There was no point in denying the obvious. "Your species is weak," continued. "You come from a soft world. You have no claws, no fangs, no fur. You break easily." Kept his expression neutral. "We are still here." Something flashed in his eyes. It might have been amusement. It might have been annoyance. Could not tell. The straightened to his full height and gestured toward the massive building behind him. Come, the council waits. We will see if you are worth the air you breathe. The warriors turned and marched toward the building, and his team followed. The walk seemed to take forever. Others watched from windows and balconies, could feel their eyes on him. He could hear low growls and what might have been laughter. The council building was even more impressive on the inside. High ceilings stretched far above them. Banners hung from the walls, each one displaying symbols did not recognize. Kate had explained that each banner represented a great hunt or a great battle, that recorded their history in blood and victory. They passed through several corridors before emerging into a large chamber. The council sat on a raised platform, 7 leaders arranged in a semicircle, took his place at the center. He gestured to a spot on the floor below them. Stand there, he commanded. Do not move unless told, do not speak unless asked, do not waste our time. Move to the indicated spot, and Kate flanked him. The position was deliberately designed to make them feel small and vulnerable. The council looked down on them from above, their faces unreadable. Before the formal proceedings began, noticed movement through a large window to his left. Beyond the glass was a garden, lush and green. Several small figures played there, chasing each other around carefully maintained plants. Cubs. Had seen pictures, but they did not do the young aliens justice. The cubs were perhaps a meter tall, covered in soft fur. Their movements were clumsy and playful, nothing like the deadly grace of the adults. They tumbled over each other, their tiny growls audible even through the thick glass. He noticed something else too. Every few minutes, an adult would walk past the garden. Each one would pause and look in, their eyes tracking the cubs with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Armed guards stood at every entrance to the garden area. Kate leaned close and whispered so quietly that only could hear. They guard the cubs more closely than they guard the council itself. Birth rates are very low. Each cub is precious. Nodded slightly, filing the information away. He turned his attention back to who had begun speaking in the tongue. Kate's translator device worked quietly, feeding the words into his ear. The negotiations had begun, and from the tone in his voice, they were not going to be easy. Made it clear from the first moment that they saw this meeting as a formality. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. They had won a few battles against mutual enemies, yes, but that did not make them equals. They had ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years. They were apex predators. Humans were just another species trying to survive in a galaxy that ate the weak. Listened to it all without reaction. He had expected this. The reports had warned him that they would test them, push them, try to provoke a response. Showing anger would prove them right. Showing fear would end the negotiations immediately. So stood still and waited for his turn to speak. And while he waited, his eyes occasionally drifted to the window, to the garden where the cubs played, unaware of the tension in the council chamber, unaware that their future and the future of countless others might depend on what happened in this room over the next few days. 3 days had passed since the negotiations began, and felt like he had aged 3 years. Every conversation with the council was a battle. Not a battle of weapons, but a battle of wills. Challenged every proposal. The other council members questioned every statement. They demanded proof of human capability, human worth, human right to even sit at the table. Had provided data, trade projections, military records, cultural exchanges. Nothing seemed to satisfy them. Kate had warned him that they operated on a completely different value system. They did not care about economic benefits or strategic advantages. They cared about strength, honor, and the ability to survive. On the morning of the 4th day, stood in the same spot where he had stood for 3 days. His legs ached. His back was stiff. But he maintained his posture and his composure. Stood beside him, alert but relaxed. Kate reviewed her notes, preparing for another round of cultural translation and diplomatic dancing. The cubs were in the garden again. Had noticed they came every morning around the same time. Today there were 5 of them instead of the usual 3. They played with the same energy and joy that human children showed. It was strange to see such innocence in a species known throughout the galaxy for their predatory nature. One cub in particular caught attention. She was smaller than the others, with lighter fur and one ear that flopped over instead of standing straight. The other cubs were rougher with their play, but this little one seemed gentler. She spent more time exploring the plants than wrestling with her companions. Found himself watching her more than he probably should. Something about the way she moved reminded him of his own daughter at that age. Curious about everything, gentle with living things, always wandering off to investigate something new. He had not seen his daughter in 6 months. Space travel and diplomatic missions did not leave much time for family. Was speaking again, his voice booming through the chamber. Kate translated quickly. He is saying that humans talk too much and prove too little. He wants to know what humans can actually do besides make promises. Took a breath preparing to respond, but he never got the chance. The explosion tore through the eastern wall of the council building with a sound that made his ears ring. The force of the blast threw him sideways. He hit the floor hard, pain shooting through his shoulder. Smoke and dust filled the air. Alarms began to scream. Through the ringing in his ears, heard shouting in the language. He pushed himself up, coughing on the smoke, was already on his feet, his weapon drawn. Kate was on the ground beside him, blood running from a cut on her forehead. Kate grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "Can you walk?" She nodded, dazed but conscious. What happened? Explosion east side. Moved toward them, his eyes scanning the smoke. "We need to get out of here." The warriors were moving through the chaos with practiced efficiency. Some formed protective circles around the council members. Others rushed toward the damaged section of the building. Was shouting orders, his voice cutting through the confusion. Another explosion rocked the building, this one closer. The floor shook under his feet. More alarms joined the first. Through the smoke and dust, could see flames beginning to spread along the eastern corridor. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. High-pitched cries, terrified screaming, the cubs turned toward the garden window. The glass had shattered from the explosions. Smoke poured through the opening. The garden area was on the eastern side of the building, right where the explosions had hit. The protective barriers had failed. Adults were already running toward the garden, but the doorways were blocked by collapsed sections of the corridor. The massive warriors tried to force their way through, but their size worked against them. The debris that a human could squeeze through was impassable for a 3-meter tall. Could see small shapes moving through the smoke in the garden. The cubs were trapped, confused, scared. One of them was crying, a sound that was eerily similar to a human child in distress. Commander grabbed his arm. "We need to evacuate, this whole section could collapse." Pulled his arm free. His eyes were fixed on the garden, on those small shapes stumbling through smoke and fire, on cubs that had no way out and adults that could not reach them. Kate saw where he was looking. Her eyes went wide. "Commander, no, you cannot go in there. They will see it as an intrusion. Going near their cubs uninvited could be seen as an attack. They might kill you on instinct alone." "They are trapped," said simply. "I know, but they will reach them. They are working on clearing the debris." There is no time. Could see the fire spreading. He could hear the sound of more structural damage. The building was coming apart. Those cubs have minutes at best. Moved to stand beside him. "Sir, I will go with you." "No," his voice was firm. "I need you to protect Kate. Get her to the evacuation point. Make sure the council knows this was not a human attack." "Commander, you will die in there." Looked at and managed a small smile. "Probably, but I have to try." Before either of them could argue further, ran toward the broken window. The opening was just large enough for a human to fit through. He heard Kate shouting behind him, heard cursing. But he did not stop. Climbed through the shattered window frame, feeling glass cut through his uniform and into his skin. He dropped into the garden on the other side. The smoke was thick here, burning his lungs. Heat from the fires made sweat pour down his face. He could not see more than a few meters in any direction. The pretty garden from earlier was now a nightmare of flames and falling debris. The cubs were somewhere in this chaos. "Hello," called out, trying to make his voice sound calm despite his racing heart. "Can anyone hear me?" A small cry answered him, off to the left past a section of collapsed wall. Moved toward it, staying low to avoid the worst of the smoke. His eyes watered. His lungs burned, but he kept moving. He found the first cub huddled behind a planter. The young's fur was covered in dust and ash. When she saw, her lips pulled back from her small teeth. A warning growl came from her throat. "Easy," said softly. "I am here to help." The cub growled again but could see she was terrified. Her whole body shook. She was too scared to run and too scared to let him get close. Knew he was being watched. Somewhere in the building, adults were seeing this on whatever security system still worked. They were seeing a human approach one of their cubs. Every instinct they had was probably screaming at them to kill him. But those cubs needed help now, and he was the only one who could reach them. Moved slowly, carefully. He kept his movements small and non-threatening. When he was close enough, he extended his hand, palm up. The cub stared at his hand like it was the most confusing thing she had ever seen. "Come on," whispered. "Let me get you somewhere safe." The cub hesitated. Then, with a small whimper, she moved toward him, scooped her up gently. She weighed less than he expected, all fur and tiny bones. She trembled in his arms but did not try to bite him. "Good girl," said. "Now let us find your friends." He heard more cries deeper in the smoke. Carried the first cub toward the sounds, using his free hand to shield them both from the heat. A section of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending up a shower of sparks. Time was running out. Found two more cubs together, trapped under a fallen beam. They were older than the first, bigger and more aggressive. When they saw him, they snarled and tried to scramble away. But the beam had them pinned. "I know," said, setting the first cub down gently. "I know I am scary, but I need you to trust me." The cubs did not trust him. They snapped at his hands as he worked to lift the beam. It was heavier than it looked, and his injured shoulder screamed in protest. But he got it high enough for the cubs to scramble free. They immediately tried to run, but blocked their path. The direction they wanted to go was pure fire. They would die in seconds if they went that way. "Not that way," said firmly. "This way, follow me." The cubs hesitated, torn between their fear of him and their fear of the fire. Made the decision for them. He scooped up the first cub again and started walking toward the broken window. After a moment, the two older cubs followed, staying close but ready to bolt at any moment. Heard another cry, fainter than the others. There was at least one more cub still out there. He passed the first three through the window too, who had ignored his orders and stayed behind. "Get them to their parents," told him. "Sir, you need to get out of here." One more said, "I heard one more." He turned back into the smoke before could stop him. The last cry had come from the far side of the garden, the section closest to the explosion. Ran toward it, jumping over debris and ducking under hanging sections of ceiling. The heat was intense now. His uniform was smoking. He found her near the eastern wall, the small cub with the floppy ear. She was lying on her side, one of her back legs bent at a wrong angle. Broken. When she saw, she tried to crawl away, whimpering in pain. "It is okay," said, dropping to his knees beside her. "I have got you, I have got you." The cub snapped at him, her tiny teeth clicking shut inches from his hand. She was in pain and terrified. Could not blame her. He carefully wrapped his hands around her small body, avoiding the injured leg. She struggled, but she was too weak to fight much. Held her against his chest and ran for the window. Behind him, he heard the sound of the ceiling beginning to give way. He dove through the opening just as a massive section of the roof crashed down where he had been standing, hit the floor hard on the other side of the window, his body curled protectively around the injured cub. Pain shot through his ribs, but he ignored it. The cub was still alive. That was all that mattered. Pulled him away from the window as more debris crashed down inside the garden. The smoke was so thick now that could barely see. His lungs felt like they were on fire. Every breath burned. "Commander," Kate appeared through the smoke, her face pale with fear. "Are you insane?" Could not answer. He was coughing too hard. The small cub in his arms whimpered and tried to squirm free. Her broken leg moved and she cried out in pain. The sound cut through like a knife. "We need to get clear," said, supporting with one arm while keeping his weapon ready with the other. "The whole eastern section is coming down." They moved through the damaged corridor, stepping over rubble and broken equipment. Warriors ran past them, some heading toward the fire, others guiding civilians toward the exits. None of them paid attention to the humans. They were too focused on the crisis. Found a quiet corner away from the main evacuation route. He sat down heavily, his back against the wall. The injured cub was still in his arms, still whimpering. Her amber eyes were wide with pain and fear. "Let me see," Kate said, kneeling beside him. She had a medical kit in her hands. "How badly is she hurt?" "Back left leg," managed between coughs. "Broken, I think." Kate carefully examined the cub's leg. The young tried to bite her, but Kate moved with practiced skill. "Definitely broken. We need to stabilize it." "Can you do that?" asked. "I am a cultural specialist, not a doctor, but I know basic first aid." Kate pulled supplies from the kit. "Keep her still." That was easier said than done. The cub was terrified and in pain. Every time Kate touched the injured leg, the little one cried out and struggled, held her as gently as he could, murmuring soft words. He did not know if she could understand him. He did not even know if she could hear him over her own distressed sounds, but he kept talking anyway. "It is okay," he whispered. "I know it hurts, but we are going to help you, I promise." The cub's struggles began to weaken, whether from exhaustion or because she was starting to understand he was not a threat, could not tell. Kate worked quickly, fashioning a splint from rigid materials in the med kit. She wrapped it carefully around the broken leg, securing it with medical tape. "That will have to do until proper doctors can see her," Kate said. She looked at with an expression he could not quite read. "That was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do." "Those are usually the same thing," muttered. He was standing guard, watching the corridor for threats. Looked down at the cub in his arms. She had stopped struggling now. Her breathing was still fast and shallow, but the panic seemed to be fading. Her good paw reached up and touched his chest, her tiny claws catching on his torn uniform. "What is your name?" asked softly, knowing she could not answer. "Do you have a name?" The cub made a small sound, almost like a chirp. Her eyes met his, and for just a moment saw something beyond the fear and pain. He saw trust beginning to form. A shadow fell across them, looked up to find 3 warriors standing over them. These were not ordinary soldiers. Their armor was marked with symbols that Kate had taught him to recognize. Elite guards, personal protectors of the council. The lead warrior stared down with unreadable eyes. His hand rested on the grip of a massive blade at his side. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Could feel tensing beside him, ready to react if needed. Then the warrior spoke in the tongue. Kate translated quickly, her voice shaking slightly. "He says commands your presence. You are to bring the cub." Nodded slowly. He started to stand, but his legs were weak. Helped him up and cradled the injured cub carefully against his chest. The little one had curled into a ball, her head tucked under his arm. The elite guards led them through the damaged building. The fires were under control now, but smoke still hung in the air. Of all ranks moved through the corridors, assessing damage and helping the wounded. noticed that many of them stopped to stare as he passed. Word of what he had done was already spreading. They emerged into a large room that recognized as some kind of medical facility. Clean white walls were lined with equipment that looked both familiar and alien. Several examination tables stood in the center of the room. Medical staff moved between them, treating injured civilians. On one side of the room stood the other three cubs had rescued. They were being examined by doctors while Adult watched anxiously. Recognized the body language even across species. Parents checking on their children. Stood near the far wall speaking with other council members. When entered, every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward him. The weight of their attention was almost physical. His face was impossible to read. He walked toward with slow, measured steps. Each footfall seemed to shake the floor. When he was close enough, he looked down at the small cub in his arms. The cub saw and made a small sound. Not a cry of fear, something else. Recognition, perhaps. This expression softened in a way he did not think was possible. The massive predator reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched the cub's head. Then looked at. His amber eyes burned with an intensity that made one step back, but held his ground. He met this gaze without flinching. "You entered the garden," said slowly. His standard was better than before, as if he was making an effort to be understood clearly. "You went to our cubs without permission, without invitation. This is forbidden." "Yes," said simply. There was no point in denying it. "You could have died, the fire, the collapse. These things did not stop you." "No." Tilted his massive head slightly. "Why?" It was the simplest question and also the hardest to answer. Looked down at the cub in his arms. She had fallen asleep against his chest, exhausted from fear and pain. Her small body rose and fell with each breath. "Because she needed help," said finally. "Because they all needed help, and I could reach them when no one else could." "You are prey species," one of the other council members said. He was older than with white fur around his muzzle. "Prey does not run toward danger. Prey runs away." "Humans are not prey," said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "We do what needs to be done, even when it is dangerous, especially when it is dangerous." The old counselor made a sound that might have been a laugh or a growl. "You are either very brave or very foolish, perhaps both." Held up one hand for silence. His eyes had not left. "You protected our cubs, you treated them with care. The small one, the one in your arms, she has a broken leg. You made a splint." "My cultural specialist did," corrected. "I just held her." "You held her," repeated. He reached out and carefully took the cub from his arms. The movement was gentle, almost tender. "You held her while she was in pain. You protected her with your own body. We saw this. The security systems, the ones that still work, we saw everything you did." Said nothing. He did not know what to say. His heart was pounding in his chest. He was suddenly very aware of how many surrounded him, how far he was from any exit, how easily they could kill him if they chose to. Handed the cub to a waiting medical staff member. The doctor took the little one carefully and carried her to an examination table. The cub woke up briefly, looked around in confusion, then saw and made a small sound. Not distressed, almost questioning. "She wants you," Kate whispered in translation. "She is asking for you. Turn to, go to her, stay while the doctors work. She trusts you." It was not a request. It was a command. Move to the examination table where the doctors were setting up equipment. The cub watched him approach. When he was close enough, she reached out with her good paw, took it gently in his hand. "I am here," he said softly. "I am not going anywhere." The doctors worked with skill and efficiency. They examined the broken leg, replaced Kate's improvised splint with something more advanced, and administered medication for the pain. Through it all, the cub held onto his hand. Sometimes she squeezed hard when something hurt. Sometimes she just held on as if to make sure he was really there. Stayed still and patient. He had nowhere else to be. Nothing else was more important than this small creature who had decided, for whatever reason, to trust him. The doctors finished their work and stepped back. One of them, an older female with streaked fur, spoke to in their language. Kate translated. "The leg will heal completely. No permanent damage. The cub was very lucky." Nodded slowly. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He approached the examination table and knelt down, not bowed, not a slight bend. He went down on one knee, bringing his massive head level with his chest. In culture, Kate had taught him, kneeling before someone was a sign of the deepest respect. It was something done for pack leaders, for alphas, for those who had earned honor through their actions. "You saved my daughter," said softly. His voice was rough with emotion. "The small one, she is mine, my only cub." Felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He looked down at the little one on the table, at her floppy ear and light fur, at the way she still held his hand even though the pain medication was making her drowsy. "I did not know," said. "Would it have mattered?" asked. Thought about it. He thought about running into the burning garden, about the fear and the smoke and the certainty that he might not come out. He thought about 4 small shapes crying in the darkness. "No," he said honestly. "It would not have mattered. She needed help. They all did. That was enough." Stood slowly. He reached out and placed one massive hand on shoulder. The weight of it was significant, but the touch was surprisingly gentle. "You are Pack," said. "This is not honor given lightly. This is not a word we use for outsiders, but you ran into fire for our cubs. You protected them with your body. You stayed with them when you could have run to safety. These are the actions of Pack, the actions of Alpha." The other in the room made sounds of agreement. Some were low growls, some were barks, but all of them carried the same meaning: respect. "I am honored," said, because he could not think of anything else to say. His mind was still trying to process what was happening. The small cub on the table made a tiny sound, looked down to see her eyes closing. The medication was taking effect, but even as she drifted toward sleep, her paw stayed wrapped around his finger. The attack on the council building had been carried out by a radical faction from the outer territories. Learned this 2 hours later while sitting in a small medical room, having his own injuries treated. The cuts from the broken glass were not deep, but they needed cleaning and bandaging. His ribs were bruised but not broken. His lungs would recover from the smoke inhalation with time and rest. Kate sat beside him, her own forehead now sporting fresh bandages. Stood by the door, having refused treatment for the minor burns on his hands. The security officer never left his post, even when ordered to rest. "The attackers have been captured," Kate said, reading from her tablet. "The security forces moved fast. They are already being interrogated." "Casualties?" asked. 12 dead, 37 injured. It could have been much worse if the bombs had been placed better." Kate looked up from the tablet. "The cubs were the targets, Commander. The bombs were positioned to destroy the garden area specifically." Felt a cold anger settle in his chest. They targeted children. "They have enemies," Kate explained. "Species who have lost territory to them, lost battles. Some of those species would do anything to hurt including killing their young. Low birth rates make every cub precious. Killing even one would be a major blow." Thought about the small cub with the floppy ear, about how she had held his hand while the doctors worked, about how she had trusted him even though every instinct should have told her to fear him. "How is she?" asked his daughter. "Resting. The doctors say she will make a full recovery. The break was clean." Kate paused, choosing her words carefully. "Commander, do you understand what happened in that medical room? What did?" "He called me Pack." "It is more than that, much more." Kate leaned forward. "In society, pack bonds are sacred. They are everything. Family, clan, tribe, all of it falls under pack. When declared you Pack, he did not just honor you. He made you part of his family, his clan, his people." Absorbed that information slowly. What does that mean for the diplomatic mission? It means everything just changed. Though we're never going to fully trust us. We are prey species in their eyes. We lack claws and fangs. We come from a soft world. But now, Kate shook her head in amazement. Now one of their most powerful leaders has declared a human to be pack. That changes the entire dynamic. A knock on the door interrupted them. Opened it to reveal one of his elite guards. The massive warrior nodded to and spoke in the tongue. Kate translated. Requests your presence in his private quarters. He wishes to speak with you alone. Stood wincing at the pain in his ribs. Alone. It is a great honor, Kate said quickly. No outsider has ever been invited to us private quarters. This is unprecedented. Should I be worried? Honestly, I do not know. The do not follow rules we understand, but if wanted you dead, you would already be dead. He wants to talk. That is a good sign. Nodded to, stay with Kate. Keep your communicator active. If I am not back in 2 hours, contact the ship. Sir, I should go with you. You should stay and protect our cultural specialist. That is an order, Lieutenant. Looked unhappy but nodded. Followed the elite guard out of the medical wing and through the damaged sections of the council building. Repair crews were already at work, clearing debris and shoring up weakened structures. They moved with efficiency and purpose. They had clearly dealt with attacks before. The private quarters were located in a section of the building that had suffered minimal damage. The guard led through several checkpoints, each one staffed by more elite warriors. They all watched with intense interest but said nothing. Finally, they reached a large door made of dark wood and metal. The guard knocked once, received a response from inside, and opened the door. He gestured for to enter, then closed the door behind him. The room was not what expected. He had imagined something harsh and militaristic. Instead, he found a space that felt almost comfortable. Soft furs covered the floor. Low furniture was arranged around a central fire pit that burned with a gentle flame. The walls were decorated with tapestries and weapons, clearly items of personal significance. Sat near the fire pit, his massive frame somehow looking less intimidating in this private space. He had removed his armor. His and black fur showed the scars of a lifetime of battles. His amber eyes tracked as the human approached. Sit, said, gesturing to a cushion across from him. Sat carefully, his injured ribs protesting. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled between them. Somewhere in the distance, could hear the sounds of the city recovering from the attack. My daughter is sleeping, said finally. The doctors say she will wake soon. She will ask for you. I am glad she is safe. Studied him with those unreadable eyes. You have a cub of your own. I see it in the way you held her, the way you spoke to her. You are a father. It was not a question, but answered anyway. Yes, a daughter. She is 7 years old. What is her name? Sophie. Made a sound deep in his chest. Not quite a growl, but something similar. Sophie, a good name. She is far from here. On Earth, with her mother. We are divorced. Was not sure why he was sharing this information. Something about the moment made honesty feel important. It is hard, said. Being away from our cubs, I lead the council, I command armies. But when I am away from my daughter, I am just a father who misses his child. Felt something shift in his understanding of the massive alien across from him. Was not just a warrior or a political leader. He was a father. And right now, he was a father whose child had nearly died. I am sorry you had to see her in danger, said quietly. I am sorry you had to risk your life to save her, leaned forward slightly. Do you know what would have happened if you had failed, if you had entered that garden and died trying to reach the cubs? I would have died. Yes, but more than that. If you had died trying to save cubs, it would have proven something important. It would have proven that humans value life, all life, not just their own species. Paused. But you did not fail. You saved 4 cubs. You carried my daughter out of fire. You held her while she was in pain. You stayed with her when you could have left. Any decent person would have done the same. No, said firmly. No, they would not. Most species in this galaxy see cubs that are not their own and feel nothing. They see potential threats or potential resources. They do not see children that need protection. But you did. Why? Thought about it. He thought about Sophie and how he would feel if she were trapped and afraid. He thought about basic human decency and the simple fact that children, any children, deserve to be safe. Because it was the right thing to do, said finally. Because they were scared and hurt and needed help. Because I could help them when no one else could. It does not matter what species they were. They were kids in danger. That is enough. Was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled and popped. Outside, the sounds of the city continued. Finally, the spoke again. The council met while you were in the medical wing. We discussed what happened today. We discussed you and your actions. There was much debate. Felt his stomach tighten. This was it. This was where everything would be decided. Some on the council still see humans as weak, as prey. They argue that what you did was foolish, not brave. That you risked your life for cubs that are not your own species, which proves you lack proper survival instincts. His eyes glinted in the firelight. But I see something different. I see a species that understands what it means to be truly strong. I do not understand. Any creature can be vicious, explained. Any animal can fight and kill and take what it wants. That is not strength. That is just instinct. True strength is choosing not to fight when you could. True strength is protecting those weaker than yourself. True strength is running into fire for cubs that are not your blood, not your pack, not even your species. Began to see where this was going. There have been apex predators for millions of years, continued. We are strong, we are fast, we are deadly, but we have lost something along the way. We have forgotten that strength without wisdom is just violence. Power without restraint is just cruelty. He stood slowly and walked to one of the tapestries on the wall. This is the first law of the pack. The strong protect the weak. The alpha guards the cubs, not just their own cubs, all cubs. Stood as well, though it hurt his ribs to do so. You think humans understand this? I think you proved it today. I think your entire species might understand something that we have forgotten. Turned to face him. The council has decided to accept the trade agreement, all of it. The terms you proposed, the exchanges you suggested, everything. Felt shock wash over him, just like that. Just like that. But understand, this is not because of economics or strategy. This is because you showed us who humans really are. You showed us that humans are not prey. You are not predators either. You are something else. Something we need to learn from. I am just one human, said. I do not represent my entire species. Do you not? Moved closer. Would another human have done the same? If it were not you but one of your crew members, would they have run into that fire? Thought about, and Kate. About the thousands of humans serving in the fleet and the diplomatic corps. About the men and women who had raised him and taught him and shaped who he was. Yes, he said honestly, many of them would have. Made that deep sound in his chest again. Then humans are exactly what I thought. Strong not because you are vicious, but because you know when to be gentle. Brave not because you have no fear, but because you act despite your fear. This is the mark of a true alpha. He placed both hands on shoulders, a gesture of pack acceptance. You will stay on Prime as ambassador. You will teach us about humans. You will help us remember what we have forgotten. And you will be pack, always pack. Felt the weight of what was being offered, and the weight of what was being asked. My daughter, I have not seen her in 6 months. Bring her here, said simply. Bring your family, they will be packed too. They will be protected, honored, safe. She is human. Your people will see her as weak. My people will see her as pack, corrected. And anyone who threatens pack will answer to me. In that moment understood. This was not just about politics or trade agreements. This was about building something new, something that could change how species interacted across the galaxy. and it had started because one man had chosen to help 4 scared children, regardless of the danger. 3 months had passed since the attack on the council building. Stood in the same medical facility where he had first been declared Pack, but everything felt different now. The building had been fully repaired. New security measures were in place, and the garden had been rebuilt, stronger and safer than before. The small cub with the floppy ear walked toward him with only the slightest limp. The doctors had done excellent work. Her fur had grown fuller, and she had gained weight. She looked healthy and happy. When she saw, she made a chirping sound and ran the last few steps, nearly knocking him over with her enthusiasm. "Easy," laughed, kneeling down to her level. "Your leg is still healing." The cub, whose name he had learned was, ignored his concern and climbed into his lap. She had lost all fear of him. In fact, she seemed to prefer his company to almost anyone else except her father. It had become a daily ritual. Would come to the medical facility and would be waiting for him. They would sit together while she told him stories in the language that he was slowly learning to understand. Today she was particularly excited. She chattered away, her small paws gesturing wildly, caught about half of what she was saying, something about the garden and new flowers and her friends. Kate appeared in the doorway, smiling at the scene. "She is telling you that they planted earth flowers in the memorial garden. She wants you to come see them." Earth flowers looked at Kate in surprise. The council decided to create a memorial for those who died in the attack. They included a section dedicated to the alliance between humans and, apparently, insisted on earth flowers. Kate's smile widened. She told the gardeners that you would like them. Tugged on's hand, still chattering. She wanted to show him now. Stood carefully, letting the young cub lead him by the hand. Kate followed behind, her tablet tucked under her arm. The memorial garden was beautiful. It occupied the space where the old garden had been, but it was larger now and more carefully designed. Artists had created sculptures representing the victims of the attack. Names were carved into black stone. Fountains provided the sound of flowing water. And in the center, surrounded by native plants, was a small section of earth roses. Red, white, and yellow blooms stood out against the darker foliage. They looked strange and out of place, but somehow they worked. 2 worlds coming together. Pulled to the roses and pointed at them proudly. She looked up at him with her amber eyes, clearly waiting for approval. "They are beautiful," said softly. "Thank you." The cub beamed and hugged his leg. Others in the garden watched the interaction with interest. 3 months ago, they would have seen it as strange or even wrong. Now it was simply accepted. The human ambassador and this daughter, Pack, appeared from another path in the garden. The massive had been in meetings all morning, but he always made time to see his daughter. When saw him, she ran to him with the same enthusiasm she had shown, scooped her up easily, holding her against his chest while she told him all about the flowers. "She has good taste," said Tu in standard. His grasp of the language had improved significantly. "Earth flowers are hardy. They survive in difficult conditions. They bloom even when everything around them is hostile, much like your species." "Is that a compliment or an observation?" asked. "Both." Sat down, and she immediately ran off to play with 2 other cubs who had arrived. "The council meets tomorrow. They wish to discuss expanding the alliance. Other species are watching what we have built here. Some are interested, some are afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that if humans can become Pack, it changes everything. The old rules, the old hierarchies, predator and prey, strong and weak. If those boundaries can be crossed, what else might change?" Watched his daughter play, his expression thoughtful. "Change is frightening, even necessary change." Had learned that was more than just a warrior. There was a philosopher as well, someone who thought deeply about the nature of strength and leadership. Their conversations over the past 3 months had taught more about culture than years of study could have provided. "What do you think will happen?" asked. "I think the galaxy is about to learn what they have learned, that humans are not what they appear to be. You look soft and weak. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. You come from a world that should have made you easy prey. Turn to look at. But you are survivors. You are adapters. And more than that, you care about things that most species have forgotten to care about. Like what? Like cubs that are not your own. Like justice and fairness. Like doing what is right even when it is hard. Paused. The footage of you rescuing the cubs has been seen across the galaxy. Do you know what other species say about it? Shook his head. He had tried to avoid watching the recordings. The whole experience was still too raw. Some say you were foolish. Some say you were showing off. But most say something else. Most say they have never seen a species act that way, running into danger for children of another race, staying calm and gentle when fear would be natural, protecting the weak at risk to yourself. His voice held something that might have been pride. Most say they wish their own species had that quality. I was not trying to make a political statement, said quietly. I just wanted to help. I know, that is why it matters. You did not think about alliances or treaties or what other species would think. You just saw cubs in danger and acted. That kind of instinct, that kind of basic decency, cannot be taught. It cannot be faked. It is either part of who you are or it is not. A transport ship flew overhead, heading toward the spaceport. Watched it pass, thinking about all the changes that had happened in such a short time. The trade agreements were being implemented. Human ships now docked regularly at ports. Cultural exchanges were beginning. And more importantly, real friendships were forming between members of both species. My daughter arrives tomorrow, said Sophie. She is nervous about meeting Is nervous about meeting her too, replied with what might have been a smile. She has never met a human cub. She asks me every day if they play the same games, if they like the same things, if they will be friends. What did you tell her? I told her that your daughter is brave like her father, that she has traveled across the stars to be here, that she must be curious and strong. Watched the cubs playing in the garden. I also told her that sometimes the best friendships begin with fear and uncertainty, that true pack bonds are forged through overcoming differences, not ignoring them. Appreciated the wisdom in those words. Sophie had been scared when he first told her about Prime. The pictures of that had frightened her. They looked like the monsters from her storybooks, but had explained carefully. He had told her about and how the young cub had been hurt and scared. He had told her about how they valued strength but also understood kindness. And slowly, Sophie's fear had turned to curiosity. She wants to bring gifts, said, books from Earth, drawings she made. She spent weeks preparing. Has gifts prepared as well, stones from the mountains, flowers from the garden, a carved piece of wood that her uncle made. The expression softened. She wants your daughter to feel welcome, to feel safe. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the cubs play. It was a scene that would have been impossible just months ago, and humans standing together as equals, as friends, as pack. Kate approached them, her tablet in hand. Commander, the Galactic Assembly has sent a formal inquiry. They want to know more about the human alliance. Several species are requesting similar agreements. Which species? Asked. The collective, the clans, even the Dominion has expressed interest and they have been hostile to both our species for decades. Kate looked between them. What you two have built here is spreading. Other species see it and want it for themselves. Felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This had started with one impulsive decision to help children in danger. Now it was becoming something much larger, something that could reshape galactic politics. What do they want from us? Asked. Guidance, examples, proof that cross-species pack bonds can work. Kate smiled slightly. They want to know how a prey species and a predator species became family. We tell them the truth, said simply. We tell them it started with one human who chose to be brave, who chose to be kind, who chose to put cubs before his own safety. We tell them that this is what humans are, And we tell them that if they want this kind of alliance, they must be willing to see past their own prejudices. Some species will not like that message, Kate warned. Some will see it as humans trying to impose their values on the galaxy. Let them think what they want, said. We are not trying to impose anything. We are just showing what is possible when species choose to work together, when they choose to see each other as people instead of categories. Came running back to them, followed by her two friends. She climbed up's leg, using his clothes as handholds until she could perch on his shoulder. It was her favorite spot. From there, she could see everything and feel safe at the same time. One of the other cubs, a male with dark fur, watched this with fascination. He spoke to in rapid. She responded with equal speed. The conversation went back and forth several times. Kate translated quietly. He is asking if all humans are as strong as you. She is telling him that humans are strong in different ways, that they do not need claws or fangs because they have something better. He is asking what that is. She is saying courage and kindness. Felt emotion tighten his throat. This was a child's interpretation of events, simple and direct, but it captured something important, something true. Out of the mouths of cubs, murmured. They understand what many adults cannot. The afternoon wore on. Spent time with the cubs, letting them climb on him and ask questions in their limited standard. They were fascinated by his hands, his hair, his skin. Everything about him was different from them, and they wanted to understand. He answered their questions patiently, the same way he answered Sophie's endless curiosity. As the suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, walked with back toward the residential section where the human delegation lived. Was asleep on shoulder, exhausted from a day of playing. Tomorrow will be a big day, said. Your daughter arrives. The assembly sends their delegation. The galaxy watches to see what we do next. No pressure, said with a slight smile. You have already done the hard part. You showed us who you are. Now you just have to keep being that person. Keep doing what is right. Keep protecting those who need protection. Keep teaching us what we have forgotten. They reached the entrance to the human quarters. Carefully took his sleeping daughter from shoulder, mumbled something in her sleep and curled against her father's chest. She will want to see you tomorrow, said. Before your daughter arrives, she wants to help welcome her, to show her the garden, to be her friend. I think Sophie would like that. Nodded once, a gesture of respect between equals. Then he carried his daughter away into the gathering darkness. Entered his quarters and found Kate waiting for him. They had been reviewing the Assembly's inquiry, preparing responses and recommendations. But when they saw his expression, they stopped. You okay, Commander? Asked. Thought about everything that had happened. About running into fire to save children he did not know. About holding a frightened cub while doctors worked. About being declared pack by the most fearsome predators in the galaxy. About his daughter coming to live in a world where friendship crossed species lines. Yeah, he said finally. I am okay, better than okay. We are building something good here, something important. Kate smiled. We are building hope. The galaxy has not seen much of that lately. Walked to the window and looked out over the city. Lights were beginning to come on as night fell. Somewhere out there, families were settling down for the evening. Cubs were being put to bed. Stories were being told. And maybe, just maybe, some of those stories were about the human who had run into fire to save 4 cubs, about how strength could be shown through gentleness, about how the best alphas protected not just their own, but everyone who needed protection. Tomorrow, Sophie would arrive. She would meet the other cubs. She would learn about culture and history. She would grow up in a world where humans were pack, where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where courage meant doing what was right, even when it was hard. And someday, years from now, she might tell her own children about this time, about how humanity earned its place in the galaxy not through conquest or dominance, but through compassion and courage, about how one man's choice to help frightened children had changed everything. smiled at the thought. His daughter would grow up in a better galaxy than the one he had known, a galaxy where species worked together, where children of all kinds could play in gardens without fear, where strength was measured not by claws and fangs, but by character and heart. It had started with cubs in danger and an alpha who showed respect instead of rage, but it would continue with countless small acts of kindness and understanding, with humans showing the galaxy that there was another way to be strong, another way to lead, another way to live. And that thought was worth every risk he had taken, worth every scar, worth every moment of fear, because in the end he had not just saved 4 cubs, he had helped save the future for all of them. The galaxy was watching. Let them see what humans could do.